the Battle of Lepanto, the naval fight that saved Christian Europe. Imagine if the fate of an entire civilization rested on a single afternoon's fighting at sea, where over 500 warships clashed in the largest naval battle in human history to determine whether Europe would remain Christian or fall to Islamic conquest. Welcome to Ancient Battlefield. Today, we're exploring the most decisive naval engagement ever fought, where Don Juan of Austria's desperate gamble in the waters off Greece either saved Christian Europe forever or would have opened the Mediterranean to complete Ottoman domination. By 1571, the Ottoman Empire's naval power seemed absolutely unstoppable. The Turkish fleet had conquered Cyprus, raided the coasts of Italy and Spain, and controlled virtually the entire eastern Mediterranean. Sultan Selim II commanded over 300 warships and tens of thousands of the finest naval warriors in the world. But here's what's truly shocking. A coalition of Christian powers was about to challenge this supremacy in the most audacious naval operation in history. Pope Pius V had declared a holy crusade and forged the Holy League, an alliance between Spain, Venice, and the Papal States designed to stop Ottoman expansion before it was too late. The man chosen to lead this desperate venture was Don Juan of Austria, the illegitimate son of Emperor Charles V, who at just 24 years old would command the largest Christian fleet ever assembled. The Christian armada that gathered at Messina was a sight that defied belief. Over 300 warships from across Catholic Europe, including massive galleasses armed with dozens of cannons, traditional galleys packed with elite soldiers, and support vessels carrying supplies for the greatest naval expedition since ancient times. What happened next will blow your mind. They were sailing directly into what everyone believed was certain destruction. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Ottoman fleet commanded by Ali Pasha was not just numerically superior, but possessed advantages that should have guaranteed victory. Turkish naval tactics had dominated the Mediterranean for over a century. Their Janissary Marines were considered the finest naval infantry in the world, and their commanders had never lost a major engagement. The two massive fleets met on October 7, 1571, in the Gulf of Patras, near the town of Lepanto. Over 550 warships carrying more than 140,000 warriors prepared for what both sides knew would be the most important naval battle in human history. Can you imagine the sight of these vast armadas stretching across the horizon, their banners flying and their crews preparing for mortal combat? Don Juan's battle plan was audacious in its simplicity. He divided his fleet into 3 divisions. He would command the center, while Venetian Admiral Agostino Barbarigo took the left wing, and Genoese commander Gianandrea Doria controlled the right. But that's not the most amazing part. The real secret weapon was the new galleasses positioned ahead of the main battle line. The truth is even more incredible when you consider the technological revolution happening in naval warfare. The Christian galleasses were floating fortresses armed with heavy cannons that could destroy traditional galleys with devastating firepower. The Ottomans, despite their naval supremacy, had been slow to adopt this new artillery-focused approach to sea combat. The battle began with the Christian galleasses opening fire at long range, their heavy cannons smashing into the advancing Ottoman fleet with unprecedented destructive power. Turkish galleys that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves being torn apart by artillery bombardments they couldn't effectively return. Here's where it gets really interesting. This was the first major naval battle where gunpowder weapons decided the outcome. But the fighting wasn't just about technology. It was about desperate courage on both sides. As the fleets closed to ramming distance, the largest naval melee in history erupted across miles of Mediterranean waters. Thousands of galleys crashed together, their crews fighting hand-to-hand combat while their ships burned and sank around them. The center of the battle focused on the flagship duel between Don Juan's Real and Ali Pasha's Sultana. These massive galleys crashed together in a death struggle that epitomized the entire conflict. Christian Europe versus the Ottoman Empire, with the winner taking control of the Mediterranean forever. What happened next will blow your mind. Spanish Marines stormed the Ottoman flagship and captured Ali Pasha's banner. The death of Ali Pasha and the capture of the Ottoman flagship sent shockwaves through the Turkish fleet. Ships that had been advancing confidently suddenly found their chain of command shattered and their morale collapsing. But that's not the most amazing part. The psychological impact of seeing their admiral's banner in enemy hands caused panic to spread throughout the entire Ottoman armada. Here's where it gets really interesting from a strategic perspective. The Battle of Lepanto proved that Ottoman naval power wasn't invincible after all. The sight of Turkish ships fleeing or surrendering shattered the myth of Ottoman supremacy that had terrorized Europe for over a century. The human cost of this titanic clash was staggering. Contemporary sources suggest that over 30,000 men died in the fighting, with thousands more wounded or captured. The sea was literally red with blood, and debris from destroyed ships covered the water for miles. Among the wounded Christian fighters was a young Spanish soldier named Miguel de Cervantes, who would later write Don Quixote. The truth is even more incredible than the immediate military outcome suggests. The Ottoman Empire lost over 200 ships and most of its experienced naval officers and sailors. This wasn't just a tactical defeat. It was the destruction of Ottoman naval power that had taken centuries to build. But that's not the most amazing part. The victory at Lepanto had profound psychological effects across Europe. Church bells rang from Spain to Poland as news of the victory spread, and Christians who had lived in fear of Ottoman conquest suddenly believed that the Turkish advance could be stopped. The strategic consequences were equally dramatic. Ottoman expansion into the Western Mediterranean was permanently halted. Venice retained control of its maritime empire, and Spanish dominance of the sea routes was confirmed for centuries to come. The balance of power in Europe had shifted fundamentally in a single afternoon. Can you imagine how different world history would have been if the Ottomans had won at Lepanto? Turkish fleets might have conquered Italy, invaded Spain, and potentially spread Islamic rule across all of southern Europe. The entire development of Western civilization hung in the balance during those few hours of fighting. The Battle of Lepanto, the naval fight that saved Christian Europe, remains the most decisive naval engagement in human history, proving that sometimes the fate of civilizations can be determined by a few hours of desperate fighting on the high seas. It showed that technological innovation, courageous leadership, and unified purpose could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Today, as we study naval strategy and the importance of maritime power in global conflicts, we can learn from Don Juan's bold tactics and the Holy League's successful cooperation that sometimes the greatest victories require taking enormous risks for causes larger than any single nation. What do you think was the most crucial factor in this world-changing naval victory? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more decisive moments from ancient battlefields.